Rally Arcade Classics is an absolute behemoth of a grindifer of a challenge that I've spent the last 8 weeks trying to unlock as many of the different 44 cars as possible that represent rallying from the 70s through to the noughties across 48 tracks that have forward and reverse variations, are chopped up into stages so you only get bits of a track, and also change from day to night or across different weather effects too. And then we have the classes of cars that change very literally how every single one of those tracks and variations feel. And so as you grind through all of the different challenges, every one of them having an online leaderboard that makes you go, I want to go higher, and collect stars so that you can unlock new trials and new challenges and licenses to then take on the next more powerful class of car. Oh my god, it takes a while, but I finally feel like I'm good enough to do this review. So let's start off with looking at the physics and the handling models for this game, because some of it's more arcade than others. Although the clue is in the title of Rally Arcade Classics, this is definitely an arcade orientated game, but there's some simmy bits in here which makes it a really interesting hybrid. The most arcade part of this is that there is no damage model in this game whatsoever, and it takes the Gran Turismo approach of if you can bounce off it, you can, and there's no damage whatsoever. And sometimes you can use that to your advantage. And because the suspension isn't particularly mapped out in this game at all, it's more around grip on the road more than anything else. What you end up doing is, particularly in desert stages where you've got switchbacks going back and forth, but they're quite close together, and they've got hills up the slide, easy for me to say. What you can do is kind of bomb through and streamline it and kind of bounce off things, and sometimes that's quicker than actually taking the corners properly. And that brings out the more arcade, cheesable version of this game. It crops up occasionally, and I got used to it and started doing it myself because everything's tied to an online leaderboard and I've got to be competitives. But that kind of is an exception rather than the rule. Whereas what this game has decided to invest in on is grip levels across different terrains. So you've got a much sturdier grip on tarmac versus tarmac that's been in a bit of snow or ice, and there'll be variation between the two. When there's rain effects that come down, obviously you'll just keep skidding on and the brakes don't hold and the tyres never feel warm, and so you kind of just slide off to the side. And where this becomes real nuanced is that because you've got front wheel, rear wheel and four wheel drive classes of cars, and very much pitched at like a slow speed version, a medium speed version, and then like all conquering powerful classics at the top for each of those three classes, they all handle uniquely in their class, and then inside that all 44 cars handle differently too. And so some prefer to V a corner because they're able to cling onto the grip but don't like to be handbrake turn drifted. Some can keep up their speed with the handbrake drift, and actually U-ing the corner with a drift is far more advantageous. And some break away under acceleration a little bit more and get a bit like tail happy and fishtail around. Some will want to swap ends way quicker than others and feel much more weighty and lethargic. And sometimes that means that they're a bit more predictable but slower to kind of respond to things, whereas ones are much more on the nose. And what I really loved about this is that as I was unlocking more and more cars, I felt like each car had a unique handling model, simplified but unique, and that meant that I would be going back through the same stages again and again, trying out different cars to see how I could then improve my time and kind of adapt the car and my driving to the stage that I was being challenged on. This then plays into how Rally Arcade Classics uses its 48 tracks to kind of repurpose them and redress them in different ways so that it feels like there's way more content than what actually meets the eye. And so these 48 tracks have slightly different variations of themselves, shorter and longer versions, forward and reverse for all of them, but also some will then be repurposed from day to night stages and feel very different. Or it might be night and in the rain, or day and sunny, or it could be that there's a frostier version of something and then there's rain on top. And then there's the dreaded fog, which becomes so much more of an issue with the faster cars because you're then having to memorise and really pay attention to the pace notes as they're coming over the hill, because the fog turns the game into like a Silent Hill rally simulator, which I quite enjoyed the challenge of, but it did mean that those were where I was crashing the most. As you go through all of this, you are seeing repeated parts of stages again and again, but because it's always being chopped up so that there's slightly different start and end points, they do feel oddly more unique than what they actually are. And I think it's a really good way of a game repurposing its content in a way that means that you're getting your money's worth of trying out different versions of things and making you experience the same stage from different cars and conditions repeatedly. Really accentuates what I was talking about with every car feeling unique and the weather conditions really playing into the handling and the physics model of what's going on in this game. Yes, it's simplified. Yes, it's all slightly numbed down so that it's not a hardcore sim, but it all does make a difference. And so you really have to adapt your play style and driving to suit what's going on. The career structure and the unlocking of everything in Rally Arcade Classics follows some cues from Gran Turismo. So there are various different classes of car. They are all hidden behind licenses, and those licenses become unlocked once you've collected enough stars from completing stars and events from different main modes that you're playing. Those licenses contain 10 custom challenges, and everything in this game has a gold, silver and bronze target for you to achieve. The bronze targets are extremely generous and will not trouble you at all. The silvers normally are okay, although I personally struggled with front-wheel drive cars in this game and found myself slower, so clearly that's a limiting factor on my gameplay. But with the four-wheel drive and the rear-wheel drive cars particularly, I was in battling for gold trophies on every single stage. And then obviously you've got an online leaderboard collected for anyone that's played any of those stages alongside that too, so you can chase your time on that. Once you've got bronze on all of those 10 challenges, you then get that license and unlock that class for what is called Tour Mode. Tour Mode has, for each class of car and license, 4 distinct event types that repeat across different challenges that earn you credits to buy more cars, but also stars for reaching gold, silver or bronze challenge levels in each of the different events that are in there. Those 4 different event types are pure time trial, you against the clock on the rally stage. Then there's versus mode, which will pit you against one AI competitor, usually quite slow, for you to find a way to overtake and win and beat across the line. Then you'll have race mode, which puts 3 or 4 AI cars on the track for you to try and beat it for each stage as you go. And then there's drift mode, which is literally hooning around each of the stages, trying to handbrake drift your way around corners to rack up a score and get a gold, silver or bronze score as a result of that. Again, all of them have leaderboards that relate to every single challenge, and inside there's like easily a good 400 to 500 challenges in there. And this is why it's taking me 8 weeks to get through all of this, to try and actually get a wide variety of cars to unlock and buy, because it is a grind, but it's an entirely enjoyable one because of everything I've said before about the repurposing of cars, conditions and chunks of rally stages, so it feels less repetitive. And I feel like I'm being quite critical, but I need to underline that I've really enjoyed playing this game. You can unlock other cars as well through rally mode, and this is where it will chain up 5 stages with an overarching time across the lot of them against other competitors that you need to kind of race and beat to get across the line. So if you don't win the rally, you don't unlock the special car, which is either the best cars in the class and the license that you're currently in, or it might unlock a base car on the next one up for you to kind of play back and forth between different classes as you go. Alongside that, there's also online events that are weekly and monthly for you to get stuck into, and there's also a traditional classic rally mode as well, which allows you to tackle a collection of different stages across the 4 different countries and environments that all of these stages take place on. So again, if you want that more traditional rally vibe, that's here too. The last mode in the game is called Chrono mode, and I would call this free play because unlike everything else that's in this game, which has been developer handcrafted challenges. This is about you choosing the car, the track, the country, the time of day and weather conditions, so that you can then create your own challenge and go with you versus the elements. And again, that can be very helpful for just honing performances and setting up your own challenges. With everything having online leaderboards and the ability, particularly in the rally mode and your own time trial modes, you can have ghost cars of yourself to race up against, so that you can kind of see where you're getting the advantage over your previous best, for example. This just becomes a wholly you versus the leaderboard and yourself experience that I found really moreish and addictive, because no stage is really longer than like 2.5 minutes maximum. These are short, fast and nippy experiences that, as you go up the classes, translate from a nicely crafted, I'm getting my racing line perfect Sunday drive experience, it's not quite that bad, through to at the other end of the game, these cars are so beastly they don't fit on the stages anymore, and you're really wrestling around them trying to control a beast that feels untamed. And having that breadth and depth and being able to like sink your teeth into that really well is one of the best things about Rally Arcade Classics. And it's all from an indie team. That does show with some of the sound effects, so expect some very generic engine sounds, for example. I quite like the I'm going to call it Blink-182 style of early 2000s rock music as a soundtrack going on in the background. Can't complain about that. And you'll notice that the graphics are certainly not going to be towards the upper end of like a AA or a AAA title, but they are perfectly functionable, not offensive. It's consistent with its frame rate, and at no point do I run into any slowdown or bugs or issues with the game at all. It runs buttery smooth like a dream. And so that is the real key for a racing game that's indie, over having all of the special effects that maybe you want from a top tier game. There is nothing wrong with this whatsoever. And when you've got fogs and headlights on and rain effects and a relatively decent draw distance going on, this more than handles what you need for a rally game itself. And so I have to say, Rally Arcade Classics has really been an exceptionally pleasant surprise. I thought I was going to be dipping in and out of this for just a couple of hours to just enjoy myself and it would be a nice frivolous affair. I didn't expect myself 10 hours deep into the campaign mode going, right, we've just unlocked some new cars, back on those leaderboards and off and away we go. Because I found it so moreish and addictive and so just easy to pick up and play and enjoyable to see the end result as you start to climb up that leaderboard and think, I'm here back in that top 50, baby. So this is an absolute double thumbs up, particularly if you enjoy your arcade racing games more than a sim racing game or a simcade game. Rally Arcade Classics definitely have you covered.